Just when you thought you've seen everything from the state of California, they're saying, hey, hold my Bud Light. We're going to do a little bit more. They want to take kids away from parents who don't so-called affirm their child's gender preference, their gender identity, well, any identity, in fact. Look at some of the testimony from the hearing over this new bill. Watch.
My name is Abigail Martinez. It has been 3 years and 164 days since I lost my daughter, Jaylee. I miss her every single day. Let me tell you how she died. My daughter was murdered by a gender ideology. She was murdered by gender ideology. I beg you, stop pushing gender ideology. I don't want any parent to feel what I feel every day. Affirmation is not good for the health, safety, and welfare of any child.
Elected officials and members of the California state government think that they know best for that woman's child, that they actually have more wisdom, more compassion, more love, and more parental knowledge than the actual parent. We know about this testimony because of the great work of Tony Kinnett, investigative reporter at the Daily Signal, joins us now, host of the Tony Kinnett Show. Tony, this is heartbreaking. Thank you for covering this the way you did.
It's something that really boils my blood as someone who's watched education policy for years, also as a former science teacher, biology and anatomy and physiology, to watch entire groups of people ignore biology while at the same time driving a huge wedge between parents and their child with the means of the state. There's no reason that California has any business making gender affirmation one of the basic needs of a child under state law.
Yeah.
And not on, it's bewildering that we would charge parents with child abuse for this.
Setting aside the Orwellian warping of the language where gender affirmation, as they put it, actually literally means the opposite. It means allowing a child to change their biological sex. What they're doing here is insidious in warping the language about the best interest of a child. They're basically adding to the state code that gender affirmation is in the best interest of a child, and therefore, if a parent is not doing that, they are not acting in the best interest of a child, which then triggers the opportunity for the state to intervene. That's basically what we're looking at.
And not only parents, but schools, churches, hospitals all have to abide by the California Family Code and Penal Code when working with a child. If I run a business and I don't take into account the safety of a child, I'm liable for child abuse charges as the owner of that business. And under the California Family Code, that is exactly what's being put into place. And it's horrific.
A little bit more testimony I want people to see here. This is another mother. By the way, it appeared to me that it was all moms who were testifying against this. Tell me if I'm wrong. You covered it. And of every single race, every single creed, religion, ethnicity, it was across the board. It was a rainbow coalition against this, right?
There were 17 protesters that were for the bill. They all spoke English and most of them were white. And then when it came time for testimonies against the bill, over 100, I actually lost count, all different colors, creeds, 2 different languages spoken, and parents and community members were enraged over this bill.
Fascinating. Take a look at this mom here.
I am Erin Friday, lead of Our Duty, an attorney and a mother of a girl who used to believe that she was a boy. AB 957 is the first bill in the nation to codify into law that a parent who does not affirm the gender identity of the child is abusive. There is no nuance in this bill. It matters not the age of the child, the absurdity of the identity, adopted, comorbid mental health issues, or persistence. Family court judges will be compelled to favor the child who will affirm the child's delusion. Parents can easily game the system and use gender as retaliation against each other. What happens when one parent will socially affirm the child but will not agree to medicalize? Does the parent willing to do more transitioning prevail?
Yeah, these are all great questions, by the way, that she raises in her testimony, Tony, and it seems like the legislators not only ignored it, but they never even thought about those things too. They just were hell-bent on pushing this through.
No, in fact, Senator Scott Wiener, who was also the senator who was in charge of making California a sanctuary state for minor transgender surgery, he made his entire testimony about him. He said this is all a big right-wing media conspiracy to post pictures of him shirtless wearing leather at pride parades, instead of actually addressing the hundreds of testimonies of parents pleading not to have their families ripped apart by this new legislation.
Democrats dominate the state legislature in California and Sacramento, sadly. And so, of course, they dominated this committee. Was there any resistance in the vote?
Yes, there is one Republican state senator present who asked a lot of questions. Although I should say that there were several Democrats on the Judiciary Committee who questioned the language. They said it was poorly written, although they ended up voting for the bill anyway. There was one Republican senator, one lone man, who sided with the parents, and I've never heard statements from a state legislator like this before.
Yeah, in fact, we have that. Let's take a quick look at that because it's incredibly sobering. As a former Californian, this really hit me where I live. Watch.
I'm now in year 11 in the state legislature, and all the time we're proposing policies to protect children. After 11 years, I've come to a conclusion that we need to start protecting parents. That's just not happening. I've been here and witnessed a full frontal assault on charter schools, taking away parents' choice and how their children are going to be educated, to the detriment particularly of children of color. In recent years, we have put government bureaucrats between parents, children, and doctors when it comes to medical care. And now we have this where if a parent does not support the ideology of the government, they're going to be taken away from the home. Now, I agree with both Senator Wiener and Senator Laird that today it only involves divorce proceedings. And frankly, a judge can already factor this in. But I can assure you it's not going to end with divorce proceedings. In the past, when we've had these discussions and I've seen parental rights atrophied, I've encouraged people to keep fighting. I've changed my mind on that. If you love your children, you need to flee California.
Wow, that is stunning. If you this is an elected official in California working in Sacramento for over a decade saying, if you love your children, get the hell out of here.
I can't imagine were I elected to the state legislature of Indiana, which is where I've been born and raised, that I would ever tell people to leave the state that I love. And not only did he encourage parents to leave, he said the minute that he's done being in the legislature, he's packing his bags and said, and I quote, "I'm moving to America," end quote. That's just an incredible way to frame the situation.
This will have clear sailing when it comes up for a vote, and then I'm assuming Governor Newsom will sign this, right?
It does go back to the Assembly because of the amendments that were made in the Senate. So both houses will have to vote on it before it will go to Newsom's desk. And of course, he'll sign it.
I think it's also important to point out that I'm not aware of any idea coming out of California right now that isn't embraced by the power in the National Democratic Committee, the Democrats who run the show here in Washington, D.C. And by the way, Gavin Newsom will be running for president, maybe even this next election cycle. So this isn't just a California thing.
It's not. And when I look at state legislatures across the country, the Democrats in those state legislatures take a look at California and see that as the state that defines what they can get away with. And so not just in the battleground states, but also in the red states, you will see legislation like this. And it is no longer hyperbolic to say they are coming for your children and they will use the lever of the state to do so.
I'm curious, Tony, and again, I want to thank you for covering this the way you did for Daily Signal. The videos were compelling. I saw them on your social media footprint. Other than the parents and the heart-wrenching testimony, I'm sure on both sides of this, was there any scientific data shown? Was there any actual medical testimony to back up the idea of this gender ideology for children?
Yes, there were several doctors that both testified and also called in and said that they were against this bill because it was incredibly unscientific. But I do point out the testimony from Mrs. Martinez, who lost her daughter, whose suicide was driven by the incredible amount of hormones that were pumped into her daughter and the horrible social stress that was put on her as she was paraded around by the LGBT community to raise money. That is a host of really negative medical information.
Heartbreaking, but important, and that's why we really appreciate you joining us. Tony Kinnett, host of the Tony Kinnett Show, and a very important investigative reporter right now at the Daily Signal. Thank you, Tony. There's more to come on O'Connor tonight. Keep watching Salem News Channel.